I'll read this text for us. And on that day, when evening had come, this is Jesus, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." He's speaking to his disciples. And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. And other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern. He was asleep on a cushion. And they woke him, and they said to him, "Jesus, teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke, and he rebuked the wind, and he said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear. They said to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Friends, the grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of the Lord will stand forever and ever. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You can be seated. But in 1871, the great Chicago fire virtually ruined Horatio Spafford. According to one author, biographer, it was almost the biggest trial of his life, but it wasn't the biggest. 2 years later, 1873, he puts his wife, his 4 daughters on a ship. They set sail for England. All of a sudden, the ship runs into another ship. It sinks very quickly, and all 4 girls drowned there at the bottom of the ocean. So he hears about the event. He gets a telegram back from his wife, famously, infamously, and it simply reads, "Saved alone." He gets on a ship and he heads to be with his grieving wife, and he crosses the part of the ocean where the ship went down and the girls were at the bottom. And he writes, "When peace like a river attendeth my way, and sorrows like sea billows roll." And you can hear it, right? Like sea billows roll. "Whatever my lot, you have taught me to say, it is well. It is well with my soul." And the great question, if you've been anywhere near a tragedy like that, or you've experienced sort of the storm of your own soul, is how could it be well? How could it be well when pain is real and God is absent? He goes radio silent. And you see, what Spafford knew is what Mark chapter 4 bears witness to. Namely, that Christianity, or the Christian faith, that it gives to you a unique resource in the midst of your suffering. Not in spite of it, not outside of it, but in the midst of it for those who look to Jesus. It's what the Apostle Paul would go on to call in the letter to the Ephesians, the peace that surpasses understanding. There's one modern songwriter, Sandra McCracken, I think maybe you sing some of her hymns, Indelible Grace. She calls it a steady in the chaos. You see, it's this reality that in the sovereignty of God, the storms, and let's use that as sort of a metaphor, although there's a historical, real, actual storm taking place in this passage, that the storms that we encounter in life, the big ones, the small ones, the unthinkable ones, that under the sovereignty of God, they are not meaningless. They are not meaningless. But the storm, almost by way of a diagnostic, it's not just that. It's very real. It's often painful. It's scary. It's tragic. But it's also a diagnostic, and it has a way of exposing what or who our faith actually lies in. It exposes false comforts. And when, by God's grace, we're confused or we're overwhelmed or we're scared, and you go, "I'm not afraid of anything." Yeah, we are, right? Yeah, we are. But when we're in those moments, or maybe you're sort of operating at a low-grade level of fear, we just acknowledge that in our confession, right? You are actually best positioned to trust Jesus as the king who is steady in the chaos. Not just formally, we acknowledge that in our theology, absolutely, but you come to know again the peace that surpasses understanding. And you can say with all sincerity that whatever my lot, whatever comes, it is well with my soul. How do you do that? How do you do that? 3 things. In order to know this peace, to experience a kind of steady in the chaos, and again, maybe you're not feeling that this week. I mean, it's almost sweater weather out there, right? Just about. Feels very calm. I know the students are gone. Love it when they're here, but there's just a quiet here. But there's a chaos that often comes, and it comes fast. And again, maybe some of you are in the midst of that right now, or Lord help us, you will be. Right? But we need to see, number 1 here, that Jesus is powerful. Number 2, really simple but important, we're not. And number 3, that his power is for the powerless. So Jesus is powerful, we're not, but his power is for the powerless. Let's look at that together. Number 1, Jesus is powerful. Power, according to the Oxford Dictionary, very simply, it's the capacity or the ability to direct or influence the behavior of others, to change the course of events. So in a sense, I remember thinking about this, and my little boy is going to be the Hulk for Halloween. I've got a daughter, it's going to be Annie. So if you're here and you're thinking about what you're going to be for Halloween, maybe that's a superhero, and you think of this just unreal strength. But then you grow up and you begin to experience power. I'm really grateful to actually preacher, RUF, Independent Pres, Richie Sessions, who describes it like this. Power, it's almost as we go into the high school years and in college and in young adult, and as adults, we experience power as so pervasive, it's just sort of what we traffic into a room. So if you walk into a room and you see somebody who's better looking than you, who's more networked than you, they're smarter than you, what you feel in that moment, that inadequacy, is that they have more power than you. This is sort of a loose example of this, kind of a superficial one. But we're in Dallas, Texas, and I was on a little bit of a lunch break just in between appointments, and I was at this quick sort of in and out sandwich place, Italian groceries called Eatsy's. I was in Dallas, and we were in this moment, and there was this long sort of sandwich line. And you can go either this way and get a sandwich or go this way and get a salad. And there are all these sort of business people in there, and they're doing their things, and they're in between appointments, and they've got their ear pods in, which make them look like they're really listening to something and probably working on something really, amazing. And so we're all in there, and then all of a sudden, Troy Aikman walks into Eatsy's. Like Troy Aikman, Dallas Cowboys, 1990s Super Bowl fame. His hands were massive. That's a big human being, still. And it was almost like the feel in the room changed. He got in the salad line. I watched as the sandwich line changed into salad like in an instant. All because Troy Aikman was in the room. It's an even bigger deal than Dak Prescott, which we're big fans of. We're holding down, the love from Mississippi State in Dallas. But that's just a brief example. And we know people like this. You begin to sit up straight. We're in awe. And what Mark is writing in this gospel, the first century historical account of the life, death, and resurrection of Christ, he's writing this so in one sense, we might know the incomparable power and the authority of King Jesus. And it doesn't seem to be the case when we come to Mark chapter 4. It's a really interesting scene here, right? Because Jesus is surprisingly out. I mean, in his humanity, he is totally fatigued. He's been teaching by the Sea of Galilee, and when he tells his followers to, quote, take him to the other side, Jesus doesn't take the wheel, but he falls asleep in the boat. And suddenly this storm, like this Category 5, just rager, rolls in, and Jesus' followers, they have to wake him up. Look at this in verse 37. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat. So the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, and he was asleep on the cushion. It's a really particular detail because Mark is wanting to tell us this really happened. It's not just legend. And they woke him and they said to him, "Teacher," really important question, "do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke and he rebuked the wind and he said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And get this, like the wind, it ceased apparently. And there was a great calm, from chaos to calm, like that. I mean, when you wake up, like think about this scene. I was thinking about this. I just turned 40, this last year. But even like when you wake up, like aren't you just disoriented a little bit? And it takes everything to push the Mr. Coffee or the Keurig or the Nespresso thing, whatever your preferred coffee of choice is. But Jesus is not like that. In a moment, he gets up, he rebukes the wind, and he tells the sea almost to sit like a retriever. I mean, like seriously, who does that? I think we should ask that question. Who does that? Who has this kind of authority? But Scripture is making this really bold claim, and it's a truth claim, that Jesus of Nazareth, who is also the second person of the Trinity, he's just in a different league. Like, he has power to calm the storm because he has authority over the storm. See this in places like Matthew 28, where Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, later says, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." Colossians chapter 1, that all things were made for him and through him and to him. Hebrews chapter 1, he upholds the world, the universe, by the word of his power. But think about this a little bit, because that can be sort of big and out there. But what does it mean to actually say that Jesus has all authority? One of my favorite quotes, I'll share it with you, a pastor theologian. He says this, buckle up. All authority. Jesus has authority over Satan and all demons, over all angels, good and evil, over the natural universe, natural objects and laws and forces and stars and galaxies and planets and meteorites, authority over all weather systems and winds and rains and lightning and thunder and hurricanes and tornadoes, monsoons, typhoons, cyclones, authority over all their effects, the tidal waves, the floods, the fires, authority over all molecular and atomic reality, atoms, electrons, protons, neutrons, undiscovered subatomic particles, right? Quantum physics, genetic structures, DNA, chromosomes, authority over all parts and functions of the human body, every beat of the heart, every breath of the diaphragm, every electrical jump across 1 million synapses in our brain, authority over all nations and governments, Congress and legislatures, and presidents and kings and premiers and courts, authority over all armies and weapons and bombs and terrorists, and authority over all industry and business and finance and currency, authority over all entertainment and amusement and leisure and media, over all education and research and science and discovery, and over the church and over every soul and every moment of every life that has been or ever will be lived. Jesus is powerful. And here's the second point. We're not. We're not. Let's consider this. One of the most intriguing aspects of this story is really the manic fear of Jesus' followers. And rightfully so. As one commentator writes, the Sea of Galilee, it sits 700 feet below the sea level. And just about 30 miles north is Mount Hermon, 9,200 feet high. Some of you have been there. Maybe you've seen this. But the cold air from the mountains, it continually clashes with the warm air coming down from the Sea of Galilee. And as a result, there are these really impressive thunderstorms. It's sort of like this basin. But these are predominantly fishermen. So they would have seen storms in this way. They would have been accustomed to sudden storms, but this is different. I mean, they are terrified. They are totally helpless. And again, Jesus is asleep. Verse 38. They woke him and they said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" One of the immediate effects of this kind of panic mode anxiety is that it has the ability to expose sort of what's really going on in the inside. And again, this is all throughout Scripture. You see it in the Psalms, you see it here in the Gospels. It's one of the million-dollar questions. God, do you not care? Now, Jesus is going to reveal the assumptions behind this question, but this is honest. This is us. Like, Jesus, where are you? If you are so powerful, then why am I going through this? Whatever that is, fill in the blank. Why are we enduring so much? It just feels like you're asleep, and so we're sinking in these addictions and this depression, this confusion, this anxiety, maybe clinical or just low grade, which we're all operating at in a digital age. All right. Relationships maybe just feel like total dumpster fires right now. We try to find peace, but we can't. So we just eat and we drink and we watch and we scroll and we Xanax and we fantasize and we have all the things. And the questions still continue, like, why am I so lonely yet we are so connected more than ever before? Why does injustice always just seem to go undealt with? I watched over this last summer, the 4th of July, as the news came in from the Texas Hill Country. 27 campers and counselors from this camp called Camp Mystic were swept away by these floods in the middle of the night from the Guadalupe River. And I watched as 2 of the little girls were baptized members of the congregation that we planted our church out of, Highland Park Presbyterian. And I watched as these men and women who were beautiful and smart and kind and had these high net worths and they're well networked just be kicked in the soul. Like that's the only way I know how to describe it. Life just feels so overwhelming, and we just don't have categories for this. You think even as a pastor, you would have a category for this, and you just go, Jesus wept. Like, Jesus wept. And maybe you've experienced that. Maybe you've witnessed it or something similar. And I've been in ministry, for now 10 plus years, and gotten to sit with children and high school students and young adults and older saints. And I've just come to realize, that band in the 90s, REM, they kind of got it right. Like, everybody hurts. Everybody hurts. We're not immune to this, even as followers of Jesus. Maybe you were promised that. And the reason is that because we are trying to make sense of belonging to a chaotic, unruly world where we're estranged from God and alienated from one another and even ashamed of our own selves. This is the great human condition for all of those who live east of Eden. In the words of the author Herman Melville, Moby Dick, another great quote, "Heaven help us all, Presbyterian and pagan alike, for we are all somehow dreadfully cracked about the head and desperately need mending." So whether we're suffering from it, whether we're participating in it, the sinful rebellion that has so marred this world has rendered us powerless. We can't fix it. We can't fix life. We can't fix us, despite our schemes. My wife Emily and I, we have this strategy. It's like, tomorrow we're going to get our act together. Tomorrow we're going to start the thing, the routine, the diet, the regiment. Tomorrow we're going to spend more time as a family, and we're going to be present to our neighbors. There's always tomorrow. It's like Annie, right? It's going to be tomorrow. And the reason is, it's so difficult to make it happen today. It's kind of a superficial example, but we can't make it happen on our own. The fullness of shalom and peace and all that God created us to be, to glorify him and to enjoy him forever. And if you feel that in this season, it's actually really good news. Maybe one of the reasons that we've never actually experienced the power of King Jesus is because we've never first acknowledged our powerlessness. But again, this story is really good news because if that's you, number one, you see that Jesus is powerful. 2, we're not. But 3, his power is for the powerless. Let's look at this together. Now, the disciples all throughout Mark's gospel, and this is sort of a meta theme here, they're asking a big question. Who is Jesus? One of the characteristics that I hope you begin to see is that Jesus of Nazareth, he's unpredictable. He's unpredictable, like in all the best ways. Now, hold that in tension, and I think one scholar says it really well. What you see throughout the Gospels is that Jesus is, yes, he's unpredictable. In some ways, he's a wild man, but he's reliable. He's authoritative, and yet he's humble. He's human, and yet he's divine. He is gentle, but he's powerful. And I say that because Jesus' response to the disciples is a curveball that's unpredictable. Like, nobody sees this coming. Look at verse 40. He woke up, he calms the storm, and he said to them, "Why are you so afraid?" And I don't know how he said it. Why are you so afraid? Where's your faith? Have you still no faith? You see, given that moment, most of us would expect Jesus to apologize, like, "I'm sorry, I was tired," you can understand, or sympathize, "I can't imagine how scary," or even empathize, like, "I get it." But Jesus corrects their misguided assumptions, and here's what I mean by that. Let's go back to verse 38. You see, in this honest moment, like this real storm, the disciples say, "Do you not care that we are perishing?" And it seems like a legitimate question, all things considered. It would be our question. But underneath that is this idea that if Jesus cared, like if he was the Messiah, if he was the king, we wouldn't have to go through this. That's often the assumption of the disciples all throughout the Gospels. Jesus, do what you do. In this way, flex. But why do we even have to go through it? And here we come to the great question of suffering. If God is good and he's all powerful, like why does he stop the flood waters of the Guadalupe? Why doesn't he stop human trafficking in third world countries or in the cities of our own nation? Why doesn't he eradicate pancreatic cancer? Why doesn't he intervene in the darkest places and in our deepest fears? Well, in regards to the length and the intensity of suffering in our circumstances, and I know this is going to be wildly unsatisfying, I do not know why God allows them to go on or endure for as long as he does. I don't think Scripture gives to us the fullness of that question why. But what I want you to take great comfort in is this reality, that Jesus is in the boat. Like the king is in the chaos. Verse 35, on that day when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat just as he was. It's so subtle, like you almost miss it. Mark is saying, like in specific detail, that Jesus is in the boat. He doesn't personally avoid the storm and leave his followers powerless to his fury. The one who is in the boat is also the one who sits enthroned over the waves. Here you see the humanity of Jesus and the divinity of Jesus all in one. He is not immune to our suffering, and neither will he waste it. I had a good friend and a mentor. He recently passed away a couple of years ago, and his wife posted this. It was one of his sermons called "Suffering and the Strange Silence of God." And he said this. He said, "We ask God why, and he gives us a new word, with. I'm with you in the storm, with you in your pain. I will never leave you, never forsake you. I'm with you always." And that's an incredible promise, but I just want to take just the last few minutes here and ask the question, like, how do we know that that's true? Because doesn't it feel like in the hardest places, that's when we're most alone? How do we know that God is using the storms, the pain, to increase our faith, to redeem us to himself? Well, you know this because Jesus ultimately will move toward his divinely appointed rescue mission, known as the cross. This is so central in the gospel accounts. The cross of Christ is not merely an example of his love for us, but it is the place where the one who calmed the waves threw himself into the ultimate storm of sin and death. Remember the story of Jonah in the Old Testament? How they calm the storm. They throw Jonah in. So here Jesus is the true and greater Jonah. He is thrown into the only storm of eternal justice of what we owe for our rebellion against God, the sin stain, the marred world that we live in. And that storm wasn't calm until it swept the the Son of God away. The words of Tim Keller, he always says it so well. So if the sight of Jesus bowing his head into the ultimate storm is burned into the core of your being, you will never say, God, don't you care? And if you know that he did not abandon you in the ultimate storm, what makes you think that he will abandon you in the smaller yet still significant storms that we go through? And someday, of course, and this is the great promise of the new heavens and the new earth, the resurrection, the ascension, and the promised return of Jesus, that one day he will return and he will calm all storms for eternity. And if you let that penetrate to the very center of your being, you will know that he loves you. You will know that he cares, and you will have power to handle anything in life with poise, so that you can say with the Apostle Paul, we're struck down, but we're not destroyed. Although weeping lasts for the night, joy comes in the morning. That's the spiritual buoyancy that is given to us, the resource in the gospel. This unimaginable hope from this king in the chaos who says, in this world you will have trouble. Was the Grateful Dead? I should know this. Trouble ahead, trouble behind, right? But take heart. I have overcome the world. That's what Jesus is saying. Okay, so what does this mean for us? Just a brief word of application. To the anxious and confused, to those of us who are just trying to get past all of this and float above it all, to the scared, those in a kind of pain that just feels so isolating. And again, if that's not you, it's probably somebody around you. It is certainly present near this campus and in this city known as Sarpeville, Mississippi. But if that's you, to the convinced, the unconvinced, Christian, non-Christian, could it be that Jesus is looking at you by the Spirit through his word with the love of the Father, desiring conviction, not condemnation, but conviction. And he's asking, what are you afraid of? Genuinely. Don't hear that in a condemning way. He's asking, like, what are you afraid of? Genuinely. We just said that in our confession, right? Maybe that's helpful language for you to go back and think on. God, we're filled with fear of failure and rejection and inadequacy and death. We have all kinds of fears. And Jesus is saying, like, where's your faith? Like, what have you thrown yourself into thinking it will quiet the great storm of the soul? If I could just be a little more successful in work, if I could just be seen as more popular in school, if I could just have a little more comfort, if I could just get this house over in this place, like, then I would be okay. I'm a little bit older. If I could just know that I was going to be remembered for something significant and not forgotten about. Like, whatever it is, Jesus is saying, where's your faith? And for every 10 looks, or for every look that you look at your circumstances and you look at your fears, take 10 looks at Jesus himself. I'll close with this illustration. A couple of years ago, we were at this sort of local pool in East Dallas. And my little boy, Wells, who's our oldest, he was 4 at the time, he was learning how to swim. And he was really, he was nervous. We were kind of on the steps, and then we moved to the side where he was gonna have to jump into the water. And he was kind of right there, and he was going, like your knees are just sort of buckling at that age, at 4 years old, trying to jump into this big pool, and there's all this commotion around. And I said, hey, are you scared? And he said, yeah. And I said, listen, and you see that in the disciples' passage, in this passage where the disciples are more afraid of what Jesus is doing than the water itself. And I said, hey, your trust in me and your mama who are right here in the pool, it has to be greater than your fear of the water. I said, do you see what I'm saying? And he goes, like, I don't know what you're saying. I said, the water's scary, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, look, but we're standing in it. So, the thing that you're scared of, we are right here in the midst of it. And we're not going anywhere. So, look at us. Just jump to us. And it took a minute, and it was difficult, but slowly, he did it. So that's why the ministry here at First Pres, where you are in the Word of God, where you're seeing the person and work of Jesus, where you're praying for one another, where you become a place of steady in the chaos that can be experienced for a college student or someone who knows pain and isolation, it means the world, because it bears witness to the King who is, yes, over it all and one day will heal it all, but who in this moment is right there with us. So again, how can it be well? Horatio Spafford answers that question in the midst of the pain. He says, let this blessed assurance control that Christ has regarded my helpless estate and has shed his own blood for my soul. Spafford knew, despite his loss, that Jesus loved him. And so he has Christ returning. He's coming back, not to judge him, but to save him and to raise his little girls. There is an unimaginable hope for you in Jesus Christ. Do you see him? The words of Bob Dylan, the storms of raging on a rolling sea and on the highway of regret. Though winds of change are blowing wild and free, you ain't seen nothing like me yet.
We hope you enjoyed this sermon from First Presbyterian Church in Starkville, Mississippi. If you want to find out more about our church and our ministries, please visit fpcstarkville.org. If you'd like someone to reach out to you and maybe grab coffee or lunch to get to know us a little bit better, you can go to fpcstarkville.org/connect and fill out the form there. And if you like what you're doing and want to see more, go to fpcstarkville.org/give to give.